Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to the last, but hopefully a very interesting panel of another successful Capitaling Forum. Nico and Olga, thank you for having us. Congratulations, you are doing a tremendous job. Another success today, I think. Thank you. So we're here to discuss the transformation of the shipping industry. The transformation of the shipping industry is not something new anymore. It's something that we are living through and has been discussed and debated several times in forums like this one. The developments that triggered the need for changes are several and are all interconnected. The need to protect our planet and our environment, for which, allow me to use a BV motto, is what united us, leads to an increased number of regulation, international and national. Technology is evolving, helping to meet this regulation, enhance operation, but also often create challenges when same adopted. Geopolitical developments, like the invasion of Russia in Ukraine, or the water supply crisis, which is threatening the Panama Canal, these important maritime routes which link the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, add complexity to operation. But shipping is used to that, and opportunities often emerge. Finally, the market and the financial landscape are always fluid. Again, for shipping, this is business as usual, although now markets are affected by all these new challenges. Today, I have the pleasure and the honor to discuss all these issues one more time, but hopefully bringing a flavor of optimism with a distinguished panel of speakers. Allow me to present them. Mr. Jerry Kalogiratos, CEO of Capital Product Partners, Mr. George Margaronis, CEO of Latsco Shipping, Mr. George Saroglou, President of Tsakos Energy Navigation, and Mr. Stamatis Tsantanis, CEO of Seanergy Maritime Holding. So, representing a classification society that is in charge of enforcing the implementation of regulation, I'm hesitant to ask this first question. However, Mr. Saroglou, do you think that shipping is over-regulated? Also, do you think that regulation should be dictated only by IMO and not by other governmental entities, for example, EU or US Coast Guard? Can you share with us your experience on the current regulatory framework you are operating in, and what are your views and recommendations?
Thank you very much. I think shipping is not afraid of regulation. And in fact, the shipping industry in the last 30 years has adapted a lot of regulations. If we start with the implementation of the double hull principle in tankers and the orderly phase out of single hull tankers over a period of years, if we move to the introduction of the ISM code, to the development of sulfur emission control areas around the globe, and the gradual improvements in the fuel oils that we're using from heavier grades to lower sulfur grades, to maybe the latest implementation of the water ballast system convention. So there have been a lot of regulations, and I think shipping has done very well. Regulation, of course, is one thing. Implementing and verifying compliance with regulation is another thing. And this is very important in order to create an equal level playing field and not have a two-tier market with people that, at least initially comply and you have at the same time people that don't comply to the regulation. We believe that the IMO should be the only regulatory body in the shipping industry that does this regulation, for the simple reason that, first of all, we're talking about a very diverse, very international, very inclusive group that includes the majority of the world, 175 member states, a lot of governmental organizations and non-governmental organizations. So they are the perfect body to regulate an international business like shipping. I think if we let different, let's say, countries, regions, governmental bodies regulate shipping in a different way than the IMO, then this creates, again, this two-tier market. It creates confusion, it creates additional cost, which at the end of the day, the bearer of this additional cost is going to be the end user. I think right now I will focus a little bit on the fuel oils, and we know that to decarbonize, fuel oil is the first key element that we need to change. We know today that technology for zero carbon fuels is not there. We need to start with intermediate fuels like biofuels and maybe LNG, which will play a role for a few years, until we move to fuels that will be more net zero friendly fuels. We need to have a stronger framework here, and sometimes we need to look at people that are leading. And I think it's not just classification society, it's also ports that need to play a very important role in making sure, especially when we don't have an agreed specification for fuel oils, to safeguard that the quality of the fuels that they will deliver and we are going to burn is going to be the best possible quality. And for that, I will invite the main ports of the world to look at the example of Singapore and deal the same way Singapore has done with quality issues over the years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Margaronis, from another perspective, do you think that the plethora of regulation governing the shipping industry may open opportunity pathways for a well-organized company? If yes, on what way?
I would say in a nutshell, yes, it does. In as far as it also squeezes out a lot of the smaller companies that don't have the resources that are absolutely necessary to comply with all the rules and regulations that are currently in force. It's a bit of a pity, actually, because in this country, small family-run companies have been the backbone of shipping. But such is the complexity of regulations these days, that the operating framework has become very complicated. Not only do we have to deal with regulations from the IMO and also now the EU with regards to things like EU ETS, GDPR, whistleblowing policies that are now becoming mandatory. So this necessitates quite thorough analysis of what needs to be done to comply, often engaging third-party advisors so as to better understand what needs to be done. That often leads to the necessity to hire additional staff that are specialized or that we need to bring in to facilitate these needs. New departments at times need to be set up, and in addition, we also have to often engage technology as well to help us in the process. All this needs to be also, the other thing we need to keep in mind that particularly in the tanker and gas sector, we also have a lot of demands or an increasingly more stringent guidelines by the oil majors and other industrial bodies. So unfortunately, what we've seen is, not unfortunately, but what we've seen is a consolidation of particularly the sector for the more sophisticated type vessels, which is a little bit of a pity actually, because there are good small companies out there that are very serious and have been running for many, many years. So yes, in a nutshell, it's advantageous for the larger companies, less so for the smaller ones.
Very clear, thank you. Mr. Kalogiratos, going a step further than mandatory regulation, environmental, social and governance, what we call ESG criteria, are a set of standards used by some investors to assess the company behavior for the management of sustainable and ethical topics. Do you think that this is an appropriate KPI to assess the aim of a shipping company to innovate, decarbonize their fleet, and remain competitive?
No, thank you, Paillette. The short answer is yes. And I'm saying this from our own experience. We do publish a sustainability report every year in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And I think this experience has been very educational from the moment that we started. ESG, of course, is not just about the environment and decarbonization. It's very much about social responsibility and governance. And these two attributes are quite important together with the environment, not just to investors, but to all stakeholders. This could be employees, this could be suppliers, customers, financiers, and so on and so forth. But if we were to focus just for a moment on the environmental side, the ESG reporting, despite its weaknesses when it comes to definitions and benchmarkings, it can be a very useful tool to understand what companies are doing in that effect. So if a company has been a pioneer in investing in energy efficient ships or dual fuel ships that use alternative fuels and has reduced its carbon footprint, it's a fantastic way to be able to showcase that. And typically, companies that have measured their carbon footprint and understand what is their forward projection are companies that are also very conscious of where they are or where they want to go. So the use of technology and innovation is very much on their radars. So overall, I think ESG reporting in an environment like this, where decarbonization is one of the key drivers and is going to remain so for the next 2 or 3 decades, is going to play a significant role, and in a way it's welcome, as it will help companies that are progressive, are pioneers and innovate to differentiate from the more backward-looking companies going forward.
Thank you. Mr. Tsantanis, from your perspective, as the CEO of a major shipping company, is a well-established ESG practice a competitive advantage? How do various stakeholders like financiers or charterers respond to ESG requirements?
Well, thank you, Paillette. For us, we have started this process since 2015, so I believe we must have been one of the first ones with very basic things that we introduced at the time, and then we build it up over the next few years. For us, it's not a tick-of-the-box exercise. It has never been. It was a very important part of our operations and part of our DNA. And from the beginning, when we started building our fleet to the 4 million deadweight tons that we have today, it was crucial and important that we keep all the ESG and the KPIs in place. So for us, it was never something mandatory just to fulfill our obligations with charterers and bankers and everybody else, but it was part of our DNA and part of our the way of doing business. So it's very important to have that and to maintain that no matter what. As far as the reception of what we've done, as far as the US investors are concerned, to be honest, we have not really seen any particular impact as to whether we issue an ESG report or we don't. Some of our financiers are more sophisticated than others, and they take a good look at what we announce, and so is some of our charterers. I mean, some of them actually do read it, and some others just are happy with the fact that we issue the ESG report. So for us, and I would like to echo what Jerry just said, it's not only a tick-of-the-box exercise, but it's very important to have the ESG targets in place and to add value to the whole chain of the transportation work that we offer to the world.
Thank you, Stamatis. Coming to you again, Mr. Margaronis, it is obvious that the revised IMO target and timeline cannot be met without adopting alternative fuels. Do you believe that their adoption is feasible in the time frame promulgated by the IMO? And how we should approach decarbonization on the existing ship? Does carbon capture sound a feasible alternative?
Thank you, Paillette. I was actually looking through the MEPC 80 levels of ambition, as they're described. And in short, I think they are overly optimistic and non-pragmatic. I think there are various challenges here. I think first of all is the fact that alternative fuel technology at its best is at very early stage of development. Most of the new buildings now, if we look at the order book, with the exception of LNG carriers, obviously use LNG as a dual fuel. The vast majority of VLGC ships now also are dual fuel, and of course the large container ships that predominantly also have the capability of burning LNG, although now there's a trend with the adoption of green methanol by certain larger companies. But that overall is quite limited in its extent. And if you look at the more mainstream sectors like tankers and bulk carriers, there's very little that's in fact being done. But even LNG and LPG produce CO2 emissions that are far higher than what needs to be done. And in addition, LNG actually also produces methane slip, which is considered more damaging to the environment than CO2 itself. And these are fine for the interim, and this is how really we need to perceive them. Now going forward, I think, and looking at the other sectors that are critical, which are the bulk carriers and the tankers, particularly the smaller ones, I think there it's increasingly challenging to see how these ships can adopt alternative fuels. Their trade is such that involves a multitude of smaller, less developed ports, whether they're smaller bulk carriers, handies, supras, ultras, or product tankers. They're trading to all sorts of places in the world where it is, I wouldn't say impossible, but very, very difficult to see how the necessary infrastructure will ever be put in place in order to facilitate the supply of alternative fuels as and when they come along. So I think one needs to look at this problem rather than in its totality, look at it on a slightly more piecemeal approach and adopt and sort of give up on this one-size-fits-all approach. So just going back to the handies and the smaller bulk carriers and tankers, I think invariably what is likely to happen there, because these are fleets that are not growing at breakneck speeds as there are other ships like the large container ships. One would expect that as the older ships are gradually retired, more modern ships, more eco ships, more ships with burning less fuel will assist in the direction of reducing the overall shipping carbon footprint. I think the predictability of trading patterns which one encounters with larger ships and the existence of the infrastructure, I think that's useful. And that's helpful in finding solutions that are potentially viable. Now, on the alternative fuel front, at the moment, what we have is green methanol and green ammonia. They're available in only very small quantities, difficult to source, extremely expensive, and also require considerable volumes as well to yield the same result as fuel. And on top of which, green ammonia is highly toxic, and I really don't see that taking off as an alternative. Carbon capture, on the other hand, I mean, I was quite fascinated because I've been reading about it for a while. It's not new technology. It's been around land-based mainly. And that does sound like a pretty good idea. You continue using the same fuel we're using now and have the capability of capturing the carbon, which is quite considerable in terms of its amounts because it amounts to about 3 times the amount of fuel that you're burning. So the question that beckons is, what do you do with the CO2 that you capture? Where do you store it? Where do you offload it? And I know there's various challenges at the moment, and you know, companies are looking at various alternatives. I've seen a few even on YouTube that involve even dropping a solid form of the captured CO2 into the sea. I don't know what becomes of it, and I don't know the details, but that sounded like a pretty damn good idea. So that's it.
We have heard in one of the previous panel about the human element, and of course we all agree that the human element is of vital importance for this industry. Another major issue is adequate training that will be required on board the vessel for the implementation of new technologies. Mr. Saroglou, we see BIMCO and ICS notice a lack of seafarers with technical experience on chemical and crude tankers and on management level. Do you feel that this situation is likely to worsen in the coming years due to the implementation of various technological innovation on board?
I think we start with the fact that we are, as we speak, we are short on seafarers, especially officers, and this shortage is going to get worse if we have a 5-year horizon. We also don't have the training facilities, I think, worldwide to train the number of seafarers and bring lower ratings to the officer status very, very quickly. We also have technology that is evolving very quickly, and we need to integrate people with technology, and the skill sets that maybe we need to train our seafarers and our office people today might not be the same, you know, in 5 years from now or in 10 years from now, as we have a lot of unknowns as to how we are going to 100% achieve compliance with the emission goals that are being set. Knowing, for example, that today we have LNG and biofuels, tomorrow we have a different set of fuels, and who knows what we will have in 2050. We need to train continuously our people, and this new set of skills are going to become more complex. I think we're going to have on board our vessels people who will have some chemical skills, will have also some more advanced IT skills than basic knowledge of ITs. I think there are certain crises that are happening as we speak right now that makes this shortage of qualified seafarers even worse. If we look at what is happening in the war in Russia and Ukraine, and if you think that almost 50% of Ukrainians and Russians are part of the available pool of qualified seafarers today, this is a big pool to ignore or to have restrictions in being able to move from A to B, in being able to train, recertify, because you know very well that in their countries right now you cannot recertify these seafarers, let alone also deal with the psychological stress that these people are feeling going through these issues. The human element has always been very key to the success of any shipping company, and it's going to play a bigger even role going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. We all agree that safety is a key aspect in our industry. And definitely the introduction of alternative fuels brings new safety challenges for the crews. Mr. Kalogiratos, having already progressed into LNG shipping as a company some years ago, do you think LNG industry safety culture is a good starting point to be passed to other market segments adopting new fuels?
Yeah, sure. The LNG industry is definitely very well regulated with a body of clear stipulations from all the regulatory bodies, from the design and construction of a ship, from classification societies to the IMO, flag registries, and so on and so forth. And it's an industry that has been around for decades and has definitely matured quite a bit. However, I think that the trick, if you want, that has guaranteed the excellent track record of the LNG industry is not so much regulation per se. We can produce a lot of regulation, and we have excellent people that I'm sure will be able to describe and try to mitigate risks with prescribing very extensive regulations. But in the end, it's about the safety culture of its company and how this is conveyed to crews by training, by having very clear processes, manuals, and yet training again, if I may. So the LNG industry has been able to achieve that and have, let's say, a more comprehensive type of safety culture across the ship managers out there. It's mostly because it's a smaller community. The capital intensiveness of the investment requires, almost by definition, creates barriers to entry. And the companies that do go ahead with this investment, they typically create quality managers that also subsequently create this type of safety culture. So I think going back to George Margaronis' point earlier on, if we are to, let's say, look at the dry bulk industry, where owners and managers are a lot more, as it is a very fragmented industry, with different types of regulation and crew training, you wonder if we were to introduce a fuel like ammonia with its toxicity, how easy it is going to be to create the same safety culture that, for example, has been managed and safeguarded in the LNG industry. So I think there's quite a few questions to answer as with regard to alternative fuels, and simply producing more regulation is not going to be enough. It's for sure going to be needed, but I think we have to create also a very different culture to what that we currently have in certain segments of shipping.
Thank you. Touching now a different subject that we hear a lot from previous panel of my friend Spiros, digitalization is revolutionizing the shipping industry in multiple ways. AI is being utilized for predictive maintenance, route optimization, fuel consumption management. Mr. Margaronis, do you apply such practices, and have you seen benefit and at the same time challenges and difficulties? And what are those?
At Latsco, we have invested both in people and technology to drive our digitalization forward, both onshore and onboard ships. You touched on 3 points. Predictive maintenance is something that we've already embarked on a trial basis on one of our VLGCs, which was concluded during spring of this year, where we have 5 or 6, if I recall correctly, pieces of machinery that are put through this process, and we also have the necessary notation. Route optimization, it's something that we're in the process of implementing. We've shortlisted 3 companies, and hopefully by the end of this year we'll have decided on which ones to progress with. Fuel consumption management is something that we already have in place. I would say challenges, the integration of new and old personnel, bringing the two together with the different skill sets that they have and the different experiences that they have, the younger people who are more tech-oriented with the older, more traditional shipping folks. The other challenge, obviously, the accuracy of the data collected and the correct implementation of that data. And finally, as of the benefits, I would say we expect them to be considerable, but in reality, it's a little bit too early to see just yet. But we believe that they will provide for a safer and more cost-effective operation.
Digitalization is becoming part of our day life, but at the end of the day, it all comes down to money and the financial factor. A huge amount of money will be required to finance the pathway of shipping towards decarbonization. Mr. Tsantanis, where do you expect the capital to come from? And who will shoulder this responsibility? Is it investors, charterers, shipowners, contribution through market-based measure, or what else?
Well, I think that's a great question. We've been hearing figures ranging from billions to trillions in order to replace the current fleet. So I think it has become a little bit of a wild guess what the cost of decarbonization is going to be at the end of the day. The answer is that we don't know, and we don't know because you don't actually know what the prevailing solution is going to look like, whether it's going to be the hydrogen ship or the green methanol ship or the ammonias or carbon capturing or a number of things. Is it going to be an investment on the current vessels to become more efficient? It's going to be new buildings with alternative fuels. We don't really know what the solution is going to look like. So as far as the current cost is concerned, in order to improve the existing fleet, we have been very successfully for the last 5 years sharing that cost with our charterers. So I don't really believe that the first phase of decarbonization, which is improving the current fleet as it is, finance is not going to be an issue. So if we share the cost between charterers and owners, and we have seen that the charterers are way more receptive into this kind of ideas, structurings, in order to make the vessels more efficient and more environmental friendly. I think that's the way forward. Nothing can be achieved for the future if all the stakeholders of the industry do not share the cost. So as far as we're concerned, financing is not going to be a problem as long as all the stakeholders agree to share the equivalent cost associated with this investment.
How difficult to achieve that, though. I hope we all agree on that. However, it goes without saying that the viability of a shipping company depends on its ship manager ability to navigate in constant uncertainty and anticipate the changing market condition. Mr. Saroglou, what are the threats of a robust ship management? Is it regulatory compliance? Is it adoption of new technology? Is it financial stability? Please enlighten us and be short, please.
I think all of the above. All of the above. To adapt to change and to be resilient. I mean, this is what shipping has shown the whole world, that this is what we are in the last 3 years with COVID and the war in Ukraine. So shipping, of course, is people, as I mentioned before. And without the people that we have in the office and on board the vessels, we will not be able to be here standing in front of you. So their talent, their commitment, their professionalism, we cannot operate an efficient ship without them. Integration of people with technology. It is a given. With technology advancing so much, we need to marry people and technology together. We hear for so many new initiatives on artificial intelligence. We need to take this thing, examine all those things very carefully, because before we see how they apply. And we need to train our people in these new technologies and make sure that technology serves our people rather than technology, take the lead from our people. Technology is an assistant and is not substituted to people. And of course, last but not least, being financially strong and having the access to capital whenever you need it, because shipping, as we all know, is a very capital-intensive business, and good shipping times don't last forever. So this is something that everybody should have in mind, and have access to both debt and capital market money in order to grow, no matter where you are into the shipping cycle. Thank you.
Thank you. We talk about geopolitical tensions, and the last 1.5 years were experienced a lot in East Europe with the invasion of Russia and Ukraine. Mr. Margaronis, in what degree do you rising geopolitical tension in various parts of the world impact the shipping industry? Overall, is that negative or positive? Because many times we say that any geopolitical disruption is an opportunity for shipping. Do you agree with that?
It is the absolute opportunity, I'd say, particularly for the tanker space. I mean, I think what we've seen in terms of rates is very much the result of what's happened in Ukraine. And it's unfortunate that good times for us happen during dramatic times for so many thousands of people. But the reality is that the inefficiencies that have been created and the disruption to traditional trading patterns have had a profound impact on ton mile, and this is what we're seeing now.
You enjoy a very good market.
Yeah, that's right.
But we have seen alliance also in shipping, mostly on the container companies, but not only. For many are considered a safety net, allowing the way forward. Mr. Kalogiratos, do you believe that formation of alliance without stakeholders in order to share resources and information will increase your bargaining power, market access, and financial stability?
Obviously, like in any other industry, information is key and is a big advantage for its company. The footprint of its company, its ability to source transactions, its customers. There is definitely, something to be said about the value of information overall that has to be kept private to its company. But where I think sharing is going to make a lot of sense, and we should be doing a lot more about it, is exactly back to our discussion about decarbonization. Testing of alternative fuels, technologies, engines, equipment, energy-saving devices, retrofits. There should be definitely more sharing of that type of information, because in the end, we're all working towards the same goal. And I think right now, each one of us has their own basket of information, but if we were to combine it, we would have a lot more clarity as to what works and what doesn't.
Coming to the end of this interesting discussion, I hope, I would like to ask first Mr. Tsantanis, and then if anybody else would like to express his opinion. Having contact with a range of stakeholders in the industry and a good overall picture out of all the challenges discussed today, would you consider to be the biggest one that the shipping industry faces today? And what are the biggest changes you see in the horizon?
Well, that's a great question, because a few years ago, when someone was asked about the biggest fear, that was inflation. So everybody was talking about inflation, and they were absolutely right, because inflation is bad for growth, is bad for shipping, is bad for a lot of things in general. After a year and a half in a war, which is happening in Europe, and possible other geopolitical military actions in various other parts of the world, I say that inflation could be the least of our problems, and the biggest risk would be a prolonged global military situation where no one can really predict what the future is going to look like. And when I say that, I mean there are tensions in the Far East with China and Taiwan. There is the risk of potential prolonged war in Europe. There are other risks associated with that. So in our opinion, I think the biggest risk facing the world and shipping today is a global military situation that's going to have a prolonged effect, not just for the trade, but for our lives in general.
So we'll just finish on time to make it. So we all agree that the pathway towards shipping transformation is filled with challenges and opportunities, but also with many uncertainties. Sometimes we would like to have a crystal ball that will get us the right answer, but we don't have one. I take this opportunity to thank the distinguished panelists for providing their insightful views. I hope that we managed to shed some light to this million-dollar question. Please join me in giving them a well-deserved round of applause.